Life is like a game of chess. Sometimes it's your job to direct the next move. Hi, I'm Caitlin, and I'm the owner of KidVet.com. I want to talk to you today about the incredible power of clear written communication and electronic communication. Outstanding written communication is an asset that will improve your life in all aspects for the remainder of your life. With technology, more people are writing today, whether on paper, text, email, social media, whether writing a report, conducting research, formal or informal. The way you communicate impacts your success. This is true for those in a vet clinic. This is true for those wanting to go to a vet clinic. And this is true for other professional careers as well. Today, I want you to consider 4 principles of written communication. In my Keystone High School course, we spend a small chunk of time discussing soft skills that all professional schools and careers expect students to bring to their table. Did you know that sometimes over 50% of the deciding factor for admitting into professional schools has nothing to do with your grades? Let's talk for a couple minutes today about written communication. If you wish to clearly convey your message accurately and effectively, we must consider who the audience is. A lot of times we think of our readers being something more of like a newspaper or a magazine, maybe even that from a professor or a professionally written research paper. Readers can also be our friends, family, those in a vet clinic, pet owners. When your writing is clear, your target audience easily understands your ideas. But to get that understanding, we must identify the target audience. Misunderstandings and confusion can often be avoided. In a clinic, school, professional setting, that communication also reflects positively on both you and your workplace, your professionalism and your attention to detail. It builds trust or breaks trust. Adjusting tone, language, and style for each audience makes you stronger and better understood. Think about this for a moment. You are hired into a veterinary clinic and you've just finished your first day being 16 years old. At the end of the day, a fellow veterinary technician comes over and says, "Hey, Melly, we have a few minutes before the day is over. Do you have any questions from today? Anything you'd like me to go over again? Or the assignments that were going on in the clinic? How'd you feel about that?" Half an hour later, you go to clock out, and the veterinarian who owns your practice comes over. "Melly, it was nice having you on the floor today. You have a lot to learn, but I really enjoy your attitude and desire to work hard. How do you feel after your first day?" Then yet again at dinner, your parents and your siblings. "So, Melly, I heard you finished your first day at work this afternoon. What'd you think?" Although speaking, consider for a moment, would you answer those 3 people in very different ways? I know I would. Your answers are different because you have 3 different targets, 3 different audiences: your coworker, your superior, and your family. When writing, you may need to pay even extra attention to the audience, because when writing, especially electronically, it's very difficult to convey the tone and emotion that help you when you are speaking in person. Let's go for another example. "It was great, thank you," is a lot different from "It was great, thank you." Next, let's talk about clarity. Sometimes less is more. Simple, straightforward language that is logically organized is much more effective than showing off vocabulary. You know, I was working in an emergency clinic, and I don't remember which doctor told me this, but it has stuck with me. I was brand new. I was in college. I was going to become an animal scientist. And I had just landed this job at an emergency clinic. Now, fortunately for me, it was not my first veterinary clinic, but it was my first emergency clinic. I expressed my concern about interacting with clients because I was asked. I was worried I did not know enough veterinary lingo and vocabulary. When they asked me, "What does this mean?" Or "The vet said this, what does that mean?" It bothered me. It bothered me that I did not know the answers. And my vet told me, speak to them using vocabulary a fifth grader would know. Speak to them using vocabulary a fifth grader would know. That stuck with me, never failed me. And then she also gave me permission to say, well, let me have the veterinarian come back in and speak with you again to clarify. So she gave me a way out, and she let me know that she uses that same vocabulary. Guess what? A fifth grader would know it. As I'm sure you're starting to find out, my very first podcast, concise is not my strong suit. I love talking. When writing important things, though, I sometimes have to draft, even sometimes short text messages, and come back to it 5-10 minutes later, 2 hours later, sometimes even a day or more later. You know, I once took a workshop with a famous photographer, Sue Bryce. Sue is a portrait photographer turned educator now, and I haven't heard from her in ages. But during the workshop, a couple of other photographers mentioned how they do in-studio sessions and gave all of the good photos to their clients, but no one ever purchased a large portrait. And the section of the workshop that we were working on was about in-person sales. So Sue Bryce takes their images, they turn out wonderfully, they look amazing. She's a very skilled photographer, and then she calls them into her studio and she sits down with them and is in-person sale. She does not, or was teaching us not, to just send all the images. Want to know why? Same thing in the vet clinic, obviously. Information overload. When someone has too many awesome photos to choose from, they get shelved. This isn't really bad in of itself. The clients absolutely love their photos. They have zero complaints. It's just too much for their brain. Instead of looking at, say, 5 photos, choosing the best, 5 photos, choosing the best, 5 photos, and each of the 5 is the same pose, some of these at the workshop were just giving them 100 photos all at once, and it shut their brains down. Likewise, when an owner receives information, whether it's their first brand new puppy they've ever had or a trauma that was unexpected, happened at 2 o'clock in the morning to their 13-year-old beloved pet Sammy, their brains overload quickly. And when a situation isn't emergent, sending home written information is helpful. When an emergency hits, yeah, we can still send home written information, but sometimes we need decisions immediately. And their brains only have so much time and bandwidth before fatigue. Okay, so we've touched on identifying your audience and clarity of what's being written. Number 3, let's talk about organization. Coherent, focused writing increases both understanding and redundancy. When your audience isn't already facing information overload, either in a new situation or a stressful situation, adding quantity isn't helpful. A logical flow of information increases your audience's ability to comprehend and understand what you are communicating. So wait, what did I just say? Okay. If we want to be coherent and understood, we have to write and communicate in a way that makes sense. Right now, I shouldn't go back and talk about my audience again and how to define it. I need to stick with how we're going to organize it, yeah? Writing instead of speaking adds additional space for someone to process the information if they can process it in order. In animal care, the cool thing is you don't usually need to captivate your audience. So that part of the organization is already done. Because when we organize information, some of you probably learned in school, hey, when you're writing a story, you need to captivate their attention. Bring them into your story. We don't really need to do that here. That doesn't have to be the first thing. Why? They're already captivated. If you're in a vet clinic, they're paying to visit you to care for their animal. Your audience is the owner of a pet that they love, and for whatever reason, hopefully not unfortunate, they've come to you for a reason. However, we need to be very careful of what we are accidentally persuading the owner to do. And we can talk about that in a whole nother podcast. Another thing I could create an entire podcast series about is persuasion, argumentative, and informative writing. But for now, we've already talked about how to identify the audience. We've already talked about communicating clearly. Now we just need to be clear of our actual goal. If your goal is to provide information for an owner to make the informed decision, great. We need to be concise and focused on providing just that information. So, we reviewed what the audience is. We've identified the audience. We've catered our words. We've changed our style, our language, all of that. We talked about how important clarity is. Less is more. We don't want to encourage information overload. We want them to hear our message and ultimately remember the important stuff. Then lastly, I mentioned organization. Can be super simple, can be super complex, but we need to identify the purpose of our message and focus on that. So, audience, clarity, organization. All right, let's move on to the last concept, number 4. Active versus passive voice. Oh man, those of you that know what this is and you don't like English writing, you're probably just like, not this again. And some of you may not even know what this means from an English or literature point of view. So, I don't really care about the language. I don't really care that that's the active versus passive. That's the vocabulary word. Let's start with a simple example. Have you ever had to learn something and it feels so overwhelming like you're never going to get it? Life is like a game of chess. Sometimes it's your job to direct the next move. When I first learned to drive a straight drive, my dad was in the passenger seat and I stalled out, I don't know, probably 500 times before I heard a really loud screech. Not just stalling out, the whole thing screeched. Now, my dad stayed super calm. He definitely was not laughing though. I'm sure my dad thought I probably just blew up his truck. And it was his beloved little truck. But here I am wanting to drive a horse trailer. I gotta figure this out. Here we are 20 years later, the truck still runs, that's great. But I needed direction. I needed a next step. So I think of active and passive voice as being the direction, being the next step. Oddly, my dad had me close my eyes, turn around in the seat like if I was backing, and guess what happened? It worked. He gave me a direct next step instead of, throwing his hands up and giving up, getting out of the truck and going back inside. I learned by turning around backwards to listen to the truck. Another example. When I decided to work for myself, do you even know how many moving pieces are in a business model? 1 million. I wanted to do it myself because I couldn't afford to hire anyone, but I was so overwhelmed with information, I didn't know what the next step was. I kept going back to what I did know. Redesigning my website. Why? Because I was comfortable. I was comfortable in Photoshop, WordPress, coding HTML. I shelved the business stuff. I shelved the stuff that was overwhelming me. Actually, Getting people to buy my information? Not a chance. I needed and found a friend, a mentor that could give me one thing to start doing, one actionable step, one next step in an overwhelming situation. So consider this. Your dog will be required to eat a prescription diet. Or, prescription feeds are often eaten by dogs similar to yours. Let me repeat number 1 again. Your dog will be required to eat a prescription diet. Or 2, prescription feeds are often eaten by dogs similar to yours. In the first active voice sentence, there is a clear direction for the next step. There is no additional overwhelm. Should you choose this route, A will require you to do B. Your dog will eat a prescription diet. There's no decision to be made. It is clear and it is definitive. In contrast, the second passive voice sentence is forcing a pet owner to think more about the future decisions. There's no urgency. So if this was an emergency, they came into the emergency room, we need a decision tonight, there's no urgency. It's subject to be shelved. There's no encouragement or next step. It's just information. Dogs like yours usually eat prescription diets. There's no urgency. They're just eaten by dogs similar to yours. It's just information. It's vague. It's subject to, well, let me research this when I get home, never to actually be researched. Another example. Let's take a look at a patient where we need to get a dog's blood sugar under control. Diabetic patients help regulate their blood sugar levels by taking insulin. Or, we will administer insulin twice a day to Daxter to help him regulate his blood sugar levels. Which is definitive and which is personal? Which takes away the decision and simplifies the process? We're almost done. Hang tight with me. Let me reread that again so that you can participate. Which sentence, 1 or 2, is definitive? Which is personal? Which takes away the decision and simplifies the process? 1, diabetic patients help regulate their blood sugar levels by taking insulin. Or 2, we will administer insulin twice a day to help Dexter regulate his blood sugar levels. I think you know the answer. If you want more time to think, pause. If not, which one's more personal? Which one's more definitive? We're giving you the answer. We're telling you we will be giving insulin to Daxter twice a day. And it will help him regulate his blood sugar levels. There's no decision to be made. We're giving a direction, a next step. All right, so to recap, we've discussed 4 aspects of communication that are critical to understand. Written communication at that. Animal workers may love their animals, but they still work with people. And while working with people, you must be a great communicator. In fact, for those of you that want to go to vet school, that's part of the judgment call for you getting into vet school to begin with, is how well you can communicate. I always say, if you're working with animals to avoid people, you're definitely in the wrong career. All right, the 4 things we've discussed. 1, identifying your audience, the importance of the audience. 2, improving clarity, being clear, less is more. 3, organizing your material. Remember your purpose in communicating and stick to that goal. 4, active voice. Be the next step and prevent information overload. One last thing I'd like to touch on as we wrap up here. Electronic writing. In today's digital age, electronic communication is a part of daily life. More clients are requesting online portals, email communication, text message reminders. Electronic communication is constant and is the future. While there are many benefits such as speed and convenience, there are also challenges. Some social media messages have character limits. Others have research projects showing how much video time an average viewer watches. Thus, clear and effective communication becomes more challenging with character and time constraints. Maybe a reader isn't captivated and scrolls on by. Maybe they misunderstood the point. In order to effectively communicate, tone and language is key. Be mindful of how your message may be perceived and take time to clarify any points that may become unclear. In general, lots of medical lawsuits are caused by miscommunications and misunderstandings. We can talk about this more in future episodes, but for today, I hope you are walking away with a stronger understanding of a few ways. 1, you can practice effective communication today. But 2, why effective communication is so important. I want to enhance your ability to communicate stronger tomorrow. If you like this podcast episode, subscribe to the channel for future episodes. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. It was great having you here. I'll see you real soon.